Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with me. I'm your host, Rosie Gill-Moss, and I hope you're kind of constant companion on this journey. Now, each episode, I speak to a guest who has lost the person that they love. And this started off being kind of my inner circle told their stories, and then British people told their stories, and then we brought in some people from America. And today I am very excited to introduce my first guest from Australia. So welcome to the podcast, Louise. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Rosie. Good to meet you.
And when Louise first came on the camera and spoke, I was like, oh, you're not Australian. So just for clarity, listeners, she's in Australia, but not Australian. So Louise, obviously you are here because you have been to hell and back. And I know your story. And it is, in fact, I said to you, didn't I? I said, I had scheduled an hour for this, but I cancelled my next appointment because your story is quite a story. And that's in the kind of 3 or 4 paragraphs I've read ahead of time. So I think this is going to be one hell of a journey, and I'm sort of selling in for the ride here because I'm going to hand over the mic to you, as it were, and in your own words, really, just tell me about your husband. Tell me how you met. Tell me what happened. Tell me how you ended up in this crappy old club of ours.
Yeah, thank you. It is. It certainly is a crappy little club. Not so little, unfortunately.
No.
So my husband and I met in 1990. I had just come out, I was about 3 months out of a very long relationship where I was only 23, just nearly 24. And I'd dumped my boyfriend, jacked in the house we bought together, jacked in the job I had, which I'd had both the boyfriend and the job for about 5 years. And just went and did a bit of sofa surfing and got down to my last 10 quid and thought, my gosh, I really need to find somewhere to live and a job. So I walked into the village and I walked into a pub and I said, do you have any jobs? And they said, sure. And they said, you can start on Thursday. And I said, do you know anywhere I can rent a room? And they went, sure, you can live here upstairs rent free. So fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah,
Stars aligned.
This is relevant. So I started the job, and I am I know now I'm late diagnosed autistic and ADHD. So it was
all the best folks are.
This is true. This is true. We need to get the message out there. So what was that? Oh yeah. So
that was very on brand.
So this is so it's nerve-wracking for anybody starting a new thing, but when you're like us, it can be particularly nerve-wracking. Am I ever gonna make a friend again or meet anyone again or anything? How is this gonna work? And I stood and I'd never had a bar job before, and I stood behind the bar, and the first person to walk in, I ended up marrying him. So he walked in, very handsome, very scruffy, very handsome and very, very scruffy. He was labouring. and we struck a conversation, obviously. He bought me a drink, clinched it. We became best friends. For 6 months, we were best friends, just friends, really, really close. And we planned then we started planning in that 6 months to go to Australia. And then just before, a month before we went to Australia, we had our first kiss. And
so you were going to Australia just as friends?
Just as friends. We were going to Australia just as friends, that's right. But obviously fancied the pants off each other. But neither of us was he was too shy. And it was 1990, so... Well, by that time it was 1991. So anyway, we hopped on a plane, went to Australia. We were there 3 months, had a really, really interesting time. It was an amazing time. It was a difficult time because he had a job set up, which fell through because there was a recession, literally fell through while we were on the plane. So got there, had no money. And after 3 months there, we went to a very good party. Had a really good time. He drunkenly proposed to me, although he did say that he had been, when he was doing the proposal, he said, I've been working up to this for 2 weeks now. I've been really thinking about it every day, how I'm going to do this. So I'm just going to do it now and be celebrated by getting pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So we had to come home from Australia. And, we had planned on not coming home from Australia, full stop. But we had to come home because we had nothing, no money. We came back to England briefly. My parents lived abroad on a small island. So we decided to go out there, a very sunny island. So we decided to go out there and went out there. Our eldest son was born there. We got married there. And in the 6 months that my husband and I were best friends, we had a blast. I mean, I call it my sabbatical, where I went off the rails and like every day off the rails, and it was a lot of fun. I needed to do it. My life had been very serious up until that point. And all of our friendship in that village did the same thing, doing the same thing too. So anyway, Cyprus. And our eldest son was born, and we were married out there. We got a bit of island fever. I got offered. We were finding it hard for him to find work there. So I then got offered a job in Athens. So we moved to Athens. Our son was 8 months old, I think, when we moved there. And it was beautiful. Loved Athens. Really, really loved Athens. But really run out of money. The recession was biting very, very hard everywhere. There were strikes everywhere in Athens, which I think is sort of a bit of a national pastime. But other than that, it was also tough. Towards the end of those 3 months in there, my husband became very depressed and was finding it. He did an amazing job. I was working. He was doing some building on a friend's house that was up in the mountains. So he was and looking after the baby. So he would spend all Monday cooking up for the baby all week, with baby's food all week. And then he would get on the train with the baby, go up into the mountains, and he would labor every day, come back on the train exhausted with a baby. And he was phenomenal. He really was absolutely incredible, a real stoic.
I'm thinking about that bond with him and the baby as well. That's quite special.
Yes, he found it difficult. He did find it difficult, but yes, he just did an absolutely amazing job. But then it took its toll, and he became very depressed. I later found out that he'd been depressed since his teens, but sort of gone up and down. I also then we had to go back to England. We lived in a miserable little bedsit. Life got tough. And this is when I realised that my husband was an alcoholic. So we'd been married by this point 18 months.
And do you think that was sort of masked by you talk about that sabbatical, that it's if everybody's doing it, it's quite easy to miss the fact that somebody's doing it to a problematic level.
Yes.
And it's when life becomes more serious and that their lifestyle continues, that's when I guess the alarm bells start to ring a bit.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Very perceptive.
Well, 6 months, no one.
Horrible. Okay. Yeah. Certainly during that 6 month sabbatical period, it was just a lot of fun. And I assumed that he was doing it like I was, just for a bit of fun, 6 months letting hair down. I then realised that over time came to realise that his whole family are alcoholics, in denial alcoholics, but alcoholics. And then as in later years, I discovered that that went back generations, and it went across, and lots of anxiety too. So it was all self-medicating, Yeah. And they covered that up with being bon viveurs and very bohemian, My husband is an artist. I've got all his art around the walls here. He's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
But that fits that sort of tortured artist, bohemian lifestyle, the drinking.
Yeah. And I actually do think that when we finish this, I'll show you some
Please
I
do.
do think that he was a genius, but he refused to exhibit his works or anything. He would give them away to everybody rather than sell them. I think he found it too nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
He didn't have the self-belief.
That
He was
sort of
in it.
imposter syndrome as well, that you don't
Yeah,
deserve to be, compensated for your work and your time.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He was a really very intelligent guy, a very divergent thinker. I don't think he was autistic or ADHD. I'm pretty sure he wasn't. But gifted, brilliant mind, very entertaining, very witty, very generous, incredibly sensitive, like ridiculously sensitive, and very attuned to other people. And over the next few years, the depression sort of waxed and waned. He went through some periods where it was very deep and bleak and difficult, and some periods when he came out of it and it was all very good. And he went, and then the alcoholism sort of like wavered. And then by 2000, by 2000, I think 2001, he was deep in alcoholism. Like, it was bad, really, really bad. And I tried everything with him. I tried an awful lot with him. We loved each other on such a deep level. It was we had an incredibly strong bond. And we always said that we just wanted to make life better for each other. But alcoholism is a tragic illness. It's one of the things I'd like to be able to do is to break the stigma around alcoholism, because it's not something to be. I think a lot of the shame around alcoholism keeps people from getting the help that they need, as well as funding, obviously.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. I think there is so much shame, and as I'm in recovery myself, and when you start to look initially with the times I sort of teetered around looking into sobriety, and it was, you can go to NA, you can go to NA, not places where I necessarily felt anybody felt kind of, I don't know. I believe it or not, I didn't really want to sort of sit in a circle and, talk about my shames. And I found actually that the whole thing was quite geared up to men and male thinking, and that kind of surrendering of power, which I felt that I needed to take back. But even when I talk to friends now, and they would sort of be, oh, well, I've got a friend of mine, she drinks most nights, a couple of bottles, but she's not an alcoholic. And I'm like, I think they probably are. But it's like, unless you're swigging vodka out of a paper bag on a park bench and haven't washed for a month, you can't have a problem with alcohol. It's this kind of glamorization of it as well. And I'm just, let's talk about this kind of like bohemian artistic lifestyle. To not drink in that world would have probably felt quite strange. And it's that it's educating people who haven't got a problem that, some people can't just have a couple, because that's one of my least favorite. Can you not have a couple? No, because I'll turn into a beast and have 20. So it's talking about it in a way that doesn't stigmatize and shame, and say actually alcohol is one of the most addictive substances on earth, and it is pushed on us from before we are legally old enough to drink it. School sports days, you can buy Prosecco. What? Why? It's I could wax lyrical about this for a while. Seriously. Not a pot shop.
Life is victualist.
Yeah, I know. It's so but so I was like, bloody hell, then get and do the mum's race. Back in the day, I might have.
Yeah.
So while he was battling with alcoholism, you had another child, didn't you? Because you had two children together.
Yes,
you had
that's
two
right.
children. So you are, at this point, was he able to be a sort of active father, or were you finding that you were sort of carrying the more responsible load?
So when we decided to have our youngest, he was actually doing quite well in his mental health at that time. And then it was when I was pregnant with him, he hit depression again. And then when our youngest was born, he came out of it. But by the time the youngest was, well, no, actually, then what happened was not when the youngest was about 7 months old. He started my husband started a uni course in design and advertising. He should have done fine art, but he did design and advertising because I think he felt like he might be able to make some money.
More commercial, right?
Yeah, and so he went back to uni and was with loads of young kids, and he was behaving like a university student rather than like. He was also working during the holidays. He was also going out and labouring during the holidays. So it wasn't just doing that by any means. So drinking was increasing gradually over time, becoming more and more problematic. And I was becoming more and more distressed by it. And then by the time, like I said, 2010, yeah, 2010, end of 2010, no, 2001. So our eldest was 10. His dad died, and he really hit rock bottom with the alcoholism. It became extremely bad. Our youngest was going through 11 plus, our eldest was going through 11 plus, and he was worrying about it constantly, not sleeping. My husband went AWOL for a week. We didn't know where he was. This is right in the middle of the 11 plus exams, and then when that week had gone AWOL, and I saw him, and I was sitting in our living room looking out, and I was on the phone to a friend, and I was saying to her, I think I'm going to have to tend to move out because this isn't fair on the boys. It's really distressing them. This is not, I can't do this. I've got to put them first, however much I love him and however difficult this is. And at that moment, he walked down the road, and I said, oh, he's here. I'll call you back. So 20 minutes later, she still talks about this. 20 minutes later, I called her back and said, yeah, I've done it. He's gone. So yes, I just had to say, you've got to move out. And he moved out for 2 years. It was difficult. He still saw the boys every day. I made sure of that. It was really difficult. I'd started doing an open university degree in psychology, and I'd started working because our youngest one had just started school full time. And I'd started working part-time as a learning support assistant. So it's pretty full on. And then in those 2 years, we lived in a village where they offered. You went on a waiting list, and they offered you a cottage once you've been waiting for a very long time at a very low rate. It was it was like mixed social housing. And in that time, we got offered a beautiful, beautiful cottage. I was offered a beautiful cottage with the boys, and the boys and I moved out of our little flat and into this amazing place with a huge garden. And during that period, and the boys now still talk about it too, that so my sons are now 32 and 29, by the way. What a good period in our lives it was. We became a team. The three of us became a real team, and it was an amazing experience. And in that time, I was not intending for my husband to come back. I didn't see a way out of it. My greatest fear was always that he would end up, we'd walk past a homeless person on the streets and it realised it was him. That's almost my greatest fear. Not that I would, but that the boys would see their dad like that. But he sobered up. And we got back together. We asked the boys if they were okay with that. The eldest one said, yes, of course. The youngest one said, he was 9. He said, I need to think about it. He took a week. He's still like
That kid will
it.
go for
He's
it.
really,
That's that
he's a
kid will
real
go for as a
thinker.
grown man.
I know, he's a deep, deep thinker. So I was like, all right. But
Especially with our
we
predisposition to
yeah,
us and our impulsivity. I'm saying we're talking over each other now. We're demonstrating.
yeah, exactly. And I now, of course, know that the oldest one is ADHD. The youngest one probably is as well. But we had genuinely. It was fine that he did that as well, because we meant it. We explained we really do mean it. So this is not going to happen. We know all the pitfalls, and we know we've got a good team going on here. Like, so this is only if you. And the youngest one came back and said, and he came back and said, I've been thinking about it. And he said, these are my concerns at night. This is what I'm worried about. How are you going to manage it? So, but he was worried about being hurt again. And he said, so anyway, there then followed 4 years of sobriety, and it was good. It was very good 4 years. That took us to 2009, by which point I was teaching, and I had just given up teaching and got onto a doctoral course. So
resting on your laurels for you, is there?
I mean, why stand still?
Yeah.
Why let life make it easy for you? So my husband was really supportive, fantastically supportive through those 4 years. It was great. And on like the last week of my teaching, or a couple of weeks before I finished teaching and before I started the doctorate, I'd accompanied a school trip. It was secondary school. It accompanied a school trip, and when I came, when my husband picked me up from it, he said, "I've got something to tell you." Went to a party and I decided to try a drink, and he says, "I'm going to do controlled drinking," and I had a meltdown. I mean, I had a fucking.
So he'd gone to a party
meltdown.
and just decided to see if he could just have a drink.
And he did at that party. He did say, So I just had the mother of all meltdowns. And then he also said, "Oh, and by the way, my sister is coming to stay with us." And his sister is a fucking bitch. Okay?
Nice.
She's a nightmare. Yes.
Yeah.
She's a witch.
Don't mince those words. I like that.
Yeah, I won't. There's more about her to come, which is why I'm keeping this anonymous.
Yeah.
Because, I don't want to.
No, nobody wants any backlash from this.
Person. No, I do want to be able to speak about people, but not call them out.
I understand.
Yeah, she's very, very, very manipulative. My husband, a very strange lady. She's 9 years older than him, 7 years older than him, I think. Very strange lady, very fucked up herself. She's got her own mental health problems, huge mental health problems. I understand that. I get it. I really, really do. Strongly suspect narcissistic traits, but genuinely so, not the.
But also, I always feel and I feel this quite fierce, is a neurodivergent as well, that mental health problems, neurodiversity, does not give you a carte blanche to be a prick. Like, it can impact the way you respond to things, but you are still held to the same moral compass as other adults, And I think quite often it can sort of, they've got mental health problems. Well, so have I actually, but it doesn't mean I'm a prick.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
That's right. Exactly.
Not all the time.
Yeah. And it's things like one time while we were separated and my husband was drinking very heavily and the boys were suffering because of this, because they'd effectively lost their dad, though they were still seeing him. But when they did, obviously he was very drunk. She was, as I said, all his family are alcoholics, and she was also deep in alcoholism and seeing some rather serious characters as partners. And they were round at my mother-in-law's for Sunday lunch, and I went to pick the boys up because I'd stopped being invited to these, although they all lived in the same village. And she turned to my boys and said, and they were little, they were 11 and 11 and 8. And she said to them, there's nothing wrong with being an alcoholic.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
The little boys who were just looking at her like, yeah.
There's
So
nothing wrong with being an alcoholic, despite the fact that everything you have told me is that your husband was a very loving, doting father and husband. But as soon as the alcohol got its claws into him, the person that he was ceased to exist. And it's actually made the hair stand up. This always happens when I get emotional, because I can relate to that. Now, I was a problematic drinker, an alcoholic, let's call it what it is. And I know that it's this idea that talk about the glamorizing of alcohol, the normalizing of it, you know. This is her brother, and he's losing everything. Like his wife cannot keep him around the children because it's not safe, and they can't be right. And yet you're saying there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what a message to be giving to those boys. What a message to be giving to your late husband, because as long as we normalize that behavior, then people will carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. And, you know, I'd had to drill the kids into, if dad ever tries to pick you up from a friend's house or from school, or you're not to get in the car with him. You must not. You must go and tell a teacher. I had to tell the school. I had to tell the scoutmaster. I had to tell, you know.
And that's really tough for
if
you,
he ever
isn't
comes.
it?
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, they did not stick. I immediately just went, right, boys, we're leaving now, and shook them out, and we went. So that's the kind of person that she is. So when I say, I mean, she is. I don't use the term lightly. And so yes, 2009, he started drinking again, and so this is why I had a meltdown on top of meltdown, because he then said, "Oh, and by the way, my sister's coming for the weekend," and he refused to not have her. Even
and when they were together, would they drink?
Yeah, she was very, very bad influence on him. She had a strange hold on him. It's a really odd relationship. I don't understand it. But anyway. And then from then on, by 2015, so 2011, I was in the second, so it was a 3-year doctorate. I was in the second year of the doctorate. I had a bursary, a student bursary, but my husband decided that he wanted to, his working as an art therapist, but he decided he wanted to give up work and be a full-time artist, which was against my wishes. He took voluntary, it's because they were offering voluntary redundancy. And I can understand his perspective, but I said, we're going to be really, really, really poor again. We've only had 2 years of being able to make sure that you and I always eat. It hasn't been easy. But he did. And I think a lot of that was because he was drinking again, so not really thinking straight. He was also bored and frustrated by it. And I get that. For such a talented person to be struggling be finding life that hard, he really should have been doing so much more than he did. One of his friends said to me that when they were all kids, they all assumed that my husband would be the one that would find life very easy because he had it all. He had the brains, he had the looks, and he had the talent. And of all of them, he's the one that really didn't find life easy at all. And I think sometimes he was just too sensitive to this world, really.
Sounds like it. Often when people are drinking, I say this from experience, but nobody drinks like that for fun, do they? So if you're drinking to the point that you're using your family and your friends and potentially livelihood, your home, to this extent, nobody's doing that because they're having a laugh. And it's masking, we know about masking, but it's masking pain or boredom. Let's say boredom is one of the most damaging emotions if you've got an addiction problem, because it's a brilliant boredom killer, right?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. You're too drunk to notice that you're bored.
You're bored, yeah.
Or boring, even.
Well, drunk people are quite boring. I had a lady accost me. I went to the pub on Saturday night. just for a Coke with a friend. And there was a very, very drunk lady, and she came, she was admiring my tattoos, and she told me the same story that what happened over and over again. And I just looked at my friend and went, oh my God, that was me, wasn't it? Like, it just, in my head, I'm like, don't be the tattoo lady. Don't be the tattoo lady.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So,
so we built a, sorry, go on.
no, I was just going to take us back into the story, because we've gone on a glorious tangent. But so
Yes.
at this point, you are together. You're trying to make
Yeah.
this work. You're living together. And did the drinking sort of exacerbate? Did it increase sort of incrementally? It's a little bit here,
Yep.
and then suddenly.
Yeah. It did. It's sort of like, it was a gradual slide, and I could see it happening, and I could predict it. You become a bit of an expert in all of this. And
addicts become very deceptive, don't they? And they lie to you, they lie to themselves. So
God, yes.
yeah.
Incredibly deceptive. I mean, when we were clearing out the house after he died, just the places we found cans and bottles. Anyway,
Then you into someone else. It's horrible.
Yeah. So with his redundancy money, he did build a studio in the garden, which was great, and he churned out some beautiful, beautiful art, really stunning. Over the next few years, and then by 2015, though, he was very deep in alcoholism again. Things weren't good. I tried I had tried everything to try and help him. Like, I read up as much as I could. I tried joining, is it Al-Anon, the one for families?
Yes.
But it was completely useless, because they did it on Tuesdays at 5, and I said to them, that's when I'm giving my kids their dinner. What's wrong with you? But how do you think people? What kind of people can
Can't
make
leave the
it?
alcoholic to do it, can you?
No, exactly. So you're saying I need to leave my children with their alcoholic father to come
and talk about the alcoholic father.
Yeah. So it was absolutely useless. It was
And at this
completely.
point, sorry, I am just interjecting
That's all right.
here, and I hope I don't mess your
No,
flow too
not
much.
at all.
But and do feel free to tell me not to. You don't have to answer any questions. But this is a sort of personal interest. It's really, but the boys were very aware of the drinking. I mean, at what? Because I'm thinking,
Oh God, yeah.
that you get to sort of secondary school age and then become much more aware, don't they, of what, oh, dad isn't just tired on the sofa, that's drinking. And so that must have been very difficult for them, because you've made this sort of unilateral decision as a family that he's going to come home, presumably on the basis that he promised sobriety and and change. So that must have been very difficult for them to watch that happen, to watch the promise that they'd been made not come to fruition. And I'm feeling for those boys, actually.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that, because it was they who suffered the most. And this is where I take responsibility, because I should have, as soon as he went back to drinking, I said, well, you've got to go.
It's
I
easy
didn't.
to say, though, isn't it? It's easy to say.
Yes, because, when you love somebody that much and you can see the pain, and that's all I could ever see was the pain, I just thought, like, and also, like, I'm gifted with eternal optimism. I say that I will be.
And I think you just want it to work out. And one of the sentences I underlined in your application was just the sentence, we loved each other very, very deeply. And it made me, because I can read from your application that it was a turbulent relationship at the time, and your grief will be complex. But that underlying, that sentence that runs through this whole story, we loved each other very deeply, because if you didn't, you would never have let him back, would you? You'd have kicked him out the first time he had a drink again. But you so badly want them to be better. And, you're saying you could see that he wasn't drinking for fun. He was drinking because he was tormented. And so you want to save them. We've all got a slight savior complex about us, and we feel that we might be the person that can, and I guess if anybody could, it would have been you.
Yeah. And you know what, when you do love somebody that much, you want to help them. You can't not see the pain. You can't not see where it's going from. So there's this thing like, if only you do the thing, we can fix it. We tried everything. And then 2015, I said, look, this isn't a you problem. This is an us problem. So we need to go for couples counselling. And we started seeing this wonderful psychotherapist who at 70 and has just the most extraordinary talent for seeing right things through people and things. And My husband used to call her Hong Kong Philly because he said she could, was it faster in speeding, whatever it is. She could see so clearly.
See straight through the bullshit.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
cancer's
exactly.
like that. She sees straight through me. I can't do it. I can't pull the wool over her eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, she was brilliant. So we saw her, and he was drunk all the time.
What, in the sessions?
Either turning up drunk or hungover. By that point, he was drinking very, very he was drinking heavily. And we had, don't get me wrong, within these periods, there were also days of sobriety, and there were times when we had the most wonderful fun and lovely, lovely times as well. We had some great holidays together. We were still best friends. We could talk for hours. When he was sober and not hungover, which was probably get a couple of days a week.
That's why you stayed together. That's why you kept taking him back, because of those glimmers of hope and sobriety.
Yes.
And they were just enough, I guess, to keep you hanging on.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And he was my best friend. He really did. He was very supportive of me in that way. But it just went downhill and downhill and downhill. And then 2017, our therapist said, right, you need to try not drinking for 6 weeks, and then we can do the therapy, because I can't do this while you're drunk or hungover. And so we both didn't. So I did it with him. Both did it for 3 months. Not 6 weeks. It was 3 months. He said 3 months over the summer, and it was a beautiful summer. So we did quite well. And then we were supposed to, we were going to be able to start drinking again, and we're going to plan to have a drink together. We've gone away for the weekend, and we're going to do that on the 1st of August. Well, 31st of August. We've gone away for the weekend. A friend had lent us their seaside flat. I popped out to get some, I don't know, bread and butter or whatever. And I came back, and he was drinking, and I said, it's not supposed to happen till tomorrow. And maybe it's because I'm autistic, but I just thought, this is not right. This is not what I was expecting. This is not the contract. This is not what we had agreed. But he just got angry, and he started to, and he just got angrier and angrier from that point onwards, and things got bad between us. Things were very angry between us during that period. And then by the end of September, I said, look, you've got a choice to make. I can't be married to an alcoholic. I said, I'm not saying you have to give up drinking. I'm just saying I can't be married to an alcoholic. How you go about that is up to you. It's your choice. What do you want to do? And he said, I can't not be an alcoholic. I'd rather be going to be an alcoholic. So I said, okay, got to separate, which is I have to say, it's a pretty fucking horrible thing to hear.
I was going to say, that's like a real punch in the gut, that, isn't it? That's we talk about the demon taking everything, but to hear somebody verbalize that choice, that they were choosing to drink rather than to save themselves and you.
Yeah. But, yes, it sounded like on the surface of it, choosing to drink, but it wasn't. He was choosing. The fire inside him, the raging fire, the raging demon inside him had to have that posh. Otherwise, it would consume him. Because what happened then is that he persuaded me to let him stay on, and then we could go in the new year. And the therapist persuaded him to try again to not drink a little bit. He did. The doctors put him on antidepressants. They made him very anxious, so the doctor doubled the dose. Not doubled the dose, but increased the dose. They made him worse. The doctor increased the dose, and his mind completely unraveled. And when I say completely unraveled, I mean it completely unraveled. He had a full nervous breakdown. I was in a very stressful situation. I'd just taken, early in the morning, I was sitting in bed having a cup of tea, I was taking a phone call where I was getting some very difficult news professionally. And I was having to sort of like deal with it, be present and deal with that. I sorted that out, by the way. It ended up not being that bad. But at that time, it was, I didn't know that. And at that moment, my husband walked into the bedroom and he had a dressing gown cord wrapped around his hands, and he said, "Louise, you've got to help me. I'm frightened of my hands. They're going to kill me."
Oh my God.
And I just was like, and I had to say to the person on the other end, "I'm going to get back. I will sort this out. I'm going to get back to you." And then I had to try and sort my husband out. And
So
I
this
managed to
sort
find
of
somebody. Sorry?
psychotic break almost you're describing here.
Yeah.
Did this happen when he stopped drinking? So
He was on antidepressants. So yes, he wasn't drinking at that point. Like, it had only been not very long, but he was on antidepressants, and they just kept increasing the antidepressants. And this particular
that's
one,
awful.
when I then went and read in the small print, and it had happened before, like years and years and years ago, and they've been fine.
What was it, out
In
of
the small print,
curiosity?
venlafaxine.
Okay, just that. Just
And one
checking
of
it wasn't
the
what I'm on.
one
Legit.
of the, and I don't want to put people off taking it,
No,
because
but
like
different medication impacts people, doesn't it?
that's right. And it was because like he'd taken it years ago and it had worked very well. And it was just the interaction between his mental state, severe alcoholism, stress, all of those factors. But one of the rare side effects, very rare side effects, is suicidal. And that's true of a lot of antidepressants.
And actually, it's on. You look at quite a few antidepressants, and they have these warnings, don't they? It's it always strikes me as odd that in the small print at the bottom, rare side effects, and you think, gosh, that must have happened to somebody for it to even be listed. And the doctors. Sorry, I've just got to go back to this, because the state of mental health care is just it's shocking. So they just kept increasing the dose of medication that was making him worse. Wow.
That is what they're supposed to do, is that if it doesn't work, you increase it. If that doesn't work, you increase it. But I think that what they should have done was actually got him seen by so this was the GP doing it, and the GP's allowed to do that. But I think actually the GP should have spotted
a referral.
That's right. They should have seen the anxiety that was increasing, because that was the issue. And from that point on, oh my God, this is when the journey really started.
But I'll buckle in. But I just say that alcoholism it does exacerbate anxiety. But in the moment when you're drinking, I didn't think I had anxiety. I don't know, I was just a drunk. Because when I stopped drinking, I was very, very socially anxious. I was very, when my university came out, and I'm thinking, so he stopped drinking. It's been a crutch for most of his life, and probably used it to deal with these feelings of anxiety. And then that's all. I feel for the guy, actually. I feel for you. I feel for the guy as well.
Yeah, it was a nightmare, to say the least. Fortunately, by that point, both sons had left home. Our eldest one was off. Where was he? Somewhere. And the young, he finished university. I think he finished university. And our youngest one was had just gone to Australia. And anyway, so that happened. That was 2017, beginning 2008. By that point, it was 2018, because it took a while for these drugs to sort of like unravel. So sort of like he'd started taking them, and then the anxiety worsened and worsened and worsened and worsened. And then beginning of early in 2018, it completely unraveled. And I took him into psychiatric, into A&E, and first of all, his ex-brother-in-law came and helped us to get seen by the mental health team, and they were very dismissive. They just sent him out and told him to put his socks up. And then after that, took him to A&E. At his insistence, he said he needed to be admitted. He wanted to be admitted to a psych ward because he was so
He felt
frightened.
unsafe, didn't he?
Yeah, he felt really unsafe. And so took him to A&E, and the lovely A&E psychiatrist actually looked at me and said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" He said, "These are not nice places." And my husband looked at me and him and said, "We have to." He said, "I'm going to kill myself. I'm frightened. I don't want to die." So that was interesting that he
Didn't actually want to die.
He'd already started to split. Like, he knew there was a part of him that was going to kill him. There was another part of him that did not want that to happen. It was frightened of this other part. And so that then followed. So that followed then another 18 months of being in and out of psychiatric wards, which that I was right. They are horrible places. They are not good places. You're lucky if you get well from going to them. And we need them, and people do need them. And some people do have successful outcomes, and they are massively underfunded. And in the people working it and doing an incredibly stressful job. It's difficult, really, really hard. I am not studying people who are working. They're doing a difficult job in difficult circumstances, but they are not fit for purpose. They're absolutely horrible places. So anyway, he was in and out of them. He got put on so many drugs. So my husband was 6 foot tall and fit and muscular and broad-shouldered, and by summer of 2019, he weighed 10 stone, and he had shrunk because he was so hunched over to about 5'8", 9. It was weird. We couldn't believe it. We measured him and it's like, what? That can't be right. And he had akathisia. The reason he got so thin is because akathisia is a condition that is induced by taking too many psychiatric drugs, and it makes you means you can't sit still. You literally cannot. You have to pace constantly. He was walking 20 miles a day just in his room in the psych
And
ward.
that's, I suppose, that sort of image of somebody in a psychiatric unit, isn't it? Is the rocking and the pacing. Oh,
Yeah.
I've never heard that term before.
And when I pointed out to the psychiatrist, saying, "You've got to stop putting these drugs into him," because they at one point he was like a zombie. He couldn't speak. He was drooling. He could barely lift his head up. It was terrible. They wanted to do ECT on him. I went away and I did full. When they were saying that, I said, "Okay, look, I need to really think about this." I went away. I did full literature review on ECT, and TMS, transmagnetic stimulation, and then went back to my husband and, in this boiled it down to the simplest terms that we could then, so that we could make as much an informed decision as we possibly could about it. And we decided that not to go ahead with either of them, mainly because ECT, although it can be very effective, so there are some significant side effects. And TMS, it can be very effective. There's very few side effects, and it's less effective it's not as effective in men over, I think it was over 50. Sorry, I'm going off on an autistic.
No, you're not. I'm fascinated.
Beg your pardon.
Because, and just for listeners, ECT is electronic
convulsive therapy. Yeah.
And that's what you associate with psychiatric clinics or mental institutions. It's that sort of, the pads and the. Now, TMS, I actually use a device which is a home grade TMS machine, sort of similar sort of thing with a flow. I'm going to do it. I've been using it for nearly a year, and my depression score has gone from up here to right down here. Now, I've been doing counselling, medication, cannabis therapy, lots and lots of things. So, but what I feel is it's given me the space to do the steps. If that makes sense. So it's quite a new form of treatment, but it's interesting. I didn't know that it was as effective in men over 50. And I
Men
can
over 50 with chronic treatment-resistant severe
right.
depression. So if they had mild, it was better, but and for younger people, it was really quite effective. It was very effective.
Just because this is an interest of mine, did anybody ever suggest sort of alternative therapies, things like psychedelics? What's the other one? MDMA, ketamine. There's all these new treatments coming out, and I'm thinking, as an addict, they might have been quite appealing to it as well.
Well, I mean, we have always.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anymore.
That's cool.
And yes, and also, so right, so yes, so because I research, I did lots of research on MDMA assisted therapy and psilocybin therapy. I got in touch with Ben Sessa, who was leading the research, a lot of the research on it. I went to his talks. I was emailing him. Like, yeah, of course I did. I tried to get my. So, you know, I mean, like, go to source.
Yeah. But honestly, give a neurospicy a quest. Like, right, I'll find out who wrote the paper, where they live. I'll be knocking on their door at 10 a.m.
Yeah, that's right. So I was emailing him. I looked into, I researched retreats in rehab ones in Thailand, that sort of place. I was in touch with them. I had long conversations with them. Because he'd been suicidal, they wouldn't take him. I got him doing yoga with me. I looked into trauma-informed yoga. I then so then they had put him on so many drugs. We managed to persuade them to get him off the drugs. We did that, but they also got him onto diazepam. Diazepam is extremely addictive. And they discharged him to heroin, but he was addicted to diazepam. I'd looked up how to the best way to get him off, like reading the forums, and was trying to slowly wean him off that, but it became quite dangerous. By this point, so this was 2018, he had developed DID, dissociative identity disorder, otherwise used to be known as multiple personality disorder. The psychiatrist, by the way, refused to acknowledge that he had akathisia, despite the fact that it was blatantly obvious, and they refused to acknowledge DID. They diagnosed him with avoidant personality disorder, a dependent personality disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, binge eating disorder, but they refused DID because it's not in the DSM. So or at least it's controversial.
But so how did you get the diagnosis? Is that something that did you seek out another diagnosis, or is you just know from your own research this is what you had?
No, it was our therapist.
Sorry, you did say, yeah.
Who specialised in this area.
Yeah.
And was really good. And actually it was bleeding obvious as well, because the parts, the different characters, alters they call them, I think, that showed up. One of them was a very terrifying. So my husband had a traumatic experience when he was 6. He was admitted to hospital for appendicitis. They bungled the operation. He very nearly died, and they really did think he was going to die. Like, for days they thought he was just missing. Look, there's nothing we can do. He's going to die. And anyway, his mother forced him to redo the operation, and he didn't die. He survived, but traumatic. And then took him months to recover. During which time, by the way, his parents sort of like put him in the front row, left him to his own devices to recover. Not literally. I think they're just very busy household, poor kids, you know. But fed him brandy and honey sandwiches.
This poor guy didn't stand a chance.
No, he didn't stand a chance.
What I've written down, as you talked about this, and you'll be aware of this, is this adverse childhood experience, ACE, which can mimic, and often in children who have had a adverse childhood experience, you described your husband as having quite neurodivergent tendencies, quite neurodivergent thinking, but that you didn't think he was actually autistic or ADHD. But children who have experienced ACE will often display traits, won't they? So I'm thinking that at 6, this is a really profound developmental age, and the impact of that. I'm not saying this is definitely the root cause of it all, but it would track back, wouldn't it? You have this terrible thing, presumably, no therapy, no support. I mean, it's going back quite a few years as well. And that, the damage that can be done at such a young age, and that it can come to a head in their 40s, 50s. It's quite scary, actually.
Absolutely. So he was at 6, he was in hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, and he remembers it very well, and very sick, very, very sick. And so one of the alters was this terrified little boy, and he was terrified, like, in a very whiny, not very nice kind of way either. Very irritatingly whiny, but we'll be calling mummy, 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 and like this with me. It's like, mummy, I'm frightened, please don't leave me alone. Like this all the time. So this is my 6-foot husband.
This is the man that walked into the bar and took your breath away.
Yes. And then another one of them was very unpleasant, mischievous, whiny child, about maybe a little bit younger. This is probably his younger brother, that he'd sort of like internalized, because my husband had always had to sort of like, he'd always been, they're very close in age, and he'd always been told like, just give your brother the toy, just do this. He'd always been the placater, right? He always had to be the one that smoothed everything over, that kept everybody from fighting, that kept, right? So I think there's a part of him that had internalized that.
People pleasing.
There was another one that was that had learning difficulties, very significant learning difficulties, which was bizarre. There was another one, unfortunately, that was violent, and he didn't actually. He always stopped short of causing me actual harm, but he would start to choke me. He would threaten to kill me in my sleep. It was difficult. But it wasn't my husband.
I think difficult's probably the understatement, actually. That sounds terrifying. Sounds absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. And then often in the evenings, after dinner, because he was terrified, he was also, because when he was in the hospital as a child, I think that they had sort of like poked and prodded and measured his input and output constantly during the day. So he was so one of those authors, the frightened little boy, was terrified of eating and would do terrible, awful things. It was quite disgusting, some of the things as well, and was also binge eating. And so he went up to, I think, 18 stone. And just looked really ill, really, really, really terrible. And and then I managed to find so he went up to 18 stone a couple of years later, about a year or so later. But that was gradual. So then 2019, we've got him off the drugs. Finally got him off diazepam, and that was frightening. Lots and lots of A&E visits because he kept overdosing on it. Although you can't die from overdose, but it's very scary. Then I managed to find a personality disorders inpatient treatment center where it's a 9-month program, or a year-long program, 9-month program. And they go in during the week and they come home at weekends. And it was hard, but I managed to get him into that. There's very few spaces. And he wasn't really doing very well in there. He was rigid and psychodynamic.
Sorry, what was that term? He was rigidly psychodynamic. What does that mean?
The approach they used was rigidly psychodynamic.
Oh, right.
So the psychodynamic approach is where they sit there and they don't say anything.
Oh, God, I hate that.
Yeah, so did he.
I hate that. I will fill that space.
Yeah. My husband was a very, very sociable person, and he liked to put people at ease, and he wanted to talk to me, he had to have that connection with people, right? And they were just awful. But so that was hard.
And you must keep thinking, I'm trying this because I'm told this is the right thing, and then it's not. And you just.
So he was getting
The
into
phrase
trouble
"pissing
there
the wind"
because,
comes to mind.
yeah, yeah, he was getting into trouble there because he wasn't engaging. He was challenging them, and not in a horrible way, but he'd be saying, "But your processes are not working. You know, they're not right," and all of this. And so, then he developed a binge eating disorder. He wasn't coming out of his room, and this is where he started to put on the weight. And then COVID hit, like about 2/3 of the way through that program. So he had to come home and live with me, obviously.
So they shut down the program, did they?
Shut down the program. And
It feels a bit. I mean, I know you're saying that it wasn't great to your husband, but I'm thinking of all those people that were in that program suddenly being, ejected out back into COVID of all times.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how they fared. I did worry about them. So he was in there, and he had made some progress, and I was like, and I also had researched more and found out about what's it called? Biofeedback, neurofeedback.
Neurofeedback, yep.
Yeah. And so I researched about that and thought, okay, look, this is expensive, but let's give it a try. So every day after work, I would drive 3 hours there with him and 3 hours back to get him this half an hour of neurofeedback. It didn't work.
Just tell me a little bit about what that is. Sorry,
Yeah. So what they do is they put these little. It's a bit like acupuncture, but without needles.
Yeah.
So it just sends tight, very, very undetectable by your skin, by you, little electrical pulses into the brain and put it in certain points in the head. There's certain different sort of points they put it. And it's supposed to help, like, just reset things. I mean, we were desperate. We tried absolutely everything. And he wanted to be well, but he just couldn't. Still seeing a psychotherapist. She was taking supervision, left right, trying to sort of figure out what was trying to help him. But it wasn't good. And I had this violent alter, and he was also still being able to be my best friend. In the evenings, it settled down after dinner. It's like the anxiety went, and he could be.
And he was back.
Himself. He was back for a couple of hours, and then in the morning, a big bang, back again. And so because it was not good, I decided I had to leave, and I just put my CV online. I read an article about international schools and thought, right, that sounds kind of interesting and cool. I mean, I don't do things by half, No, I can't just sort of.
I know where you went.
Because I knew that if I did that, nothing actually would change. So my CV online, I got within 24 hours, I had interviews because of the job I do is quite
niche,
especially quite niche, and I had offer in Doha, another in Singapore, another in India, and one in Thailand was just coming getting to that point. And I chose India, and so in July 2021, I moved to India. And through this period, so by this point, the reason I decided to do that was because we'd managed to get my husband to the point where he was obsessed. He became obsessed with Charlie Bingham ready meals, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then, hence the weight gain as well.
Although you'd have to eat two, they're not very big.
Well, no, the doubles he was getting, not the little ones. But plus the 5 bars of chocolate, 5 avocados, and 3 bags of nuts he was eating a day.
And then avocados and the nuts for the health purposes.
Yeah. So, but, he was doing it, and I got him, we got him to the point where actually he could order, got him set up with a online Sainsbury's order. Other supermarkets are available. And set up the bills, and just got it all set up so that he could do it. He could just about do it, which was great. I mean, up until this point, because of COVID, sort of like he wasn't doing it, but up until COVID, he was phoning me. But since 2018, he was phoning me he was sending me upwards of 70 text messages a day when I was at work. He was phoning me about the same number of times, I had to block him. I had to block his phone completely, because he had been sending me text messages that had been saying, I'm going to kill myself now, I'm dying. And I'd be in meetings, I'd be in sessions with clients, and it would be sort of like, I have to put it away. And so it was pretty intense, But then but in the run up to me moving to India, he was also managing in all of that to still be my best friend. And this is where I think it'll be hard for people to understand. This is where, when I say that we loved each other on a very deep level, this is where it shows. We loved each other enough to let each other go. I had to let him go. He had to let me go. And he was knowing, we didn't know at this time that I was autistic or ADHD. And he'd always explained the world to me. He'd always explained things to me. He'd always done that. And he was online. He was knowing that how I'd be feeling about going somewhere different. He'd be online. He'd looking at Google Maps and saying, right, Louise, come and sit here. Look, this is what it's going to look around there. These are parks you can go to. This is where you'll walk to. I've looked up the area you're going to be living in. This is what it's going to be like. That, so he did loads
He
of
did you a
research.
social story.
He did. He gave me a social story. And he also obviously found it we both found it very difficult. And then we went so anyway, I got to India, had an amazing 2 years. I came home in the summer holidays in 2022, stayed with him for those 6 weeks. 8 weeks, was it? 8 weeks. Or 6 weeks. And then, we did, I got him out. I made him come to London. Did things that I knew that he liked doing. Did galleries and all of, this sort of thing. Got him to go out and see friends of ours in the village, our best friends.
What was his health like at this point? Was he taking care of himself?
No, his health was appalling. Absolutely appalling. He looked more like an 80-year-old, a very unhealthy 80-year-old. He was very, very overweight. Oh gosh, yes, I forgot. So he was this binge eating, right? And whenever I was spending a saying like, "You're really tired. You've got to see the doctor." So I was in India. We were still speaking 3 times a day. He was still extremely anxious. I was still getting probably about 30 texts a day by that point. And still these alters were still there, right? So that hadn't shifted. That was all still there.
Did he have any control over these, or did you just not know what was coming?
Well, whenever we were in the psychiatrist's office trying to get sorted, as soon as the psychiatrist would walk in, he would snap into being sensible, with it and in the room. And the second, the psychiatrist just walked out to go and get a pen, and immediately he'd turn around and it'd be one of these.
Oh God, that must be so scary.
Honestly, DID is a really very strange thing to live with. Very, and frightening for him too. So then in May 22, he was constantly falling asleep and really tired, and I was really worried. And his therapist, who was our therapist, messaged me and said, "Louise, I'm really, really worried. You've got to get him. I'm very worried that it might be diabetes." And I went, "Yeah, that makes sense, actually." So I phoned him and he said, I can't do it. I can't phone the doctor. I can't do it. It's a problem. I said, no, it's fine. What you're going to do is you're going to put me on speakerphone and you're going to phone the doctor and I'm going to speak to them. We did that. The doctor went round that within a couple of hours and said, you've got to go to hospital now. I'm going to call you an ambulance. And my husband said, no, I'll go tomorrow morning. So our best friends have been very good, very supportive of him this whole time. Our best friends, the husband had been very supportive of him this whole time. And other friends in the village. And he took him to the hospital. And my husband went in and he had diabetic ketoacidosis. And they said that if he hadn't gone into hospital that morning, he would have died then.
Wow.
And he was in there 5 days and it seemed to reset something. I think it was that little one.
Call.
Yeah, well, it was partly the wake-up call, but also that little boy who hadn't received the care finally got the care that he needed in hospital. And they were lovely to him. They were really, really caring. The diabeticness, the beautiful people. I mean, bloody love the NHS, right? You know, lots of it, it's underfunded, but the people who work in it are fabulous. And they took such good care of him. And they even to the point where they roomed him with another man who was about the same age as him, maybe a little bit older, who was real rowdy about, you know, and my husband liked that sort of thing because he had a very good sense of humour. And this guy was much further on the diabetic, like he'd had necrosis sort of going on. And he really took my husband under his wing and it reset my husband completely. He was still very anxious, but the DID went. And he then decided he wanted to get himself well, and he slowly started to try to get himself well. Very slowly, little by little. And we had a good summer together, lovely summer together. And then I went back to India. And by October, he was supposed to come and stay with me in the November, but he never got himself sorted out with getting the visa in time, and then some other government insulted Modi, and so they stopped letting English people get visas or made it very difficult for them. And I think it was Sudan government, yeah. And I realised by October that my husband started drinking again. And I knew that it was just a slippery slope. And our eldest son, who's the one who was left in England, had been really supportive of his dad, going down and staying with him 2 or 3 nights every week. You know, even though it was hard for him to see his dad in that way because his dad didn't move, very heavy smoker, couldn't get out of his chair, watched television endlessly, you know, very, very anxious. And then he went and spent Christmas with him, and his partner went to her family up north, and he said, no, I'm not going to come with you, I'm going to go and spend it with my dad. So he went and he began to have a nice day, brought this lovely food in, they were going to cook together, had a good day. But when Christmas morning came, by the time we called my husband, our youngest son and I called to wish them happy Christmas. And this was 9 o'clock in the morning, and my husband was already very, very drunk. So we called my oldest son and let him know. And obviously he was there. He was in the spare room. He hadn't got up yet, and he was distraught, absolutely distraught. And
it
left
must
the house.
be so hurtful.
It was horrendous. And he went out and was so badly hurt by it. And then he just went round to his cousins. They found him on the village green and took him back. They said, come and have Christmas with us. It's going to be fine. It was a terrible time for him. And then the next day he went and said, Dad, I need to take a break from you. I can't have any more. I can't do this.
Put the boundary in.
Yeah.
And that was really brave of him.
Really brave. I mean, phenomenal. And he had had therapy, and he got to the point where he could do that. Thank heavens he'd had therapy by that point. Started having therapy. So that was a terribly hard decision. And then the youngest one also said, I can't do it either. This is too painful. It's too hurtful. We can't do this anymore. I said, it's a break, but you've got to. And then by this point, I had been offered a job in Australia.
You would come full circle. That was where you wanted to be originally.
Yeah, that's right. But with the dream of being with the two of us together, my husband and I doing it together, right?
Yeah.
Me and man. Which is why I was out here that Christmas with my youngest son in Australia, visiting a place where I was going to be working. So I finished up my time in Australia. Over that time, it was very difficult. We still spoke to each other 3 times a day. I started slowly cutting it down to 1 or 2 times a day, and trying to encourage him to go out and see people. His best friend, we were best friends. The 4 of us were like really close, and the husband kept going around to see him every couple of weeks and pop round and see him. I was having regulars and with the wife, like supporting her through her own midlife crisis that she is going through. All that time, this becomes relevant, by the way. And in February, my husband had been in touch with his first girlfriend, and which was fine, which is great. And they started to see each other a little bit, yeah. And
romantically or
no, yeah, romantically.
No. Okay,
yeah. But she was going round to him, right, to his house, because he wouldn't go out at all. By this point, my husband was a shell of his former self. I mean, there was nothing. He was unrecognizable, and I mean completely unrecognizable. He didn't wash very often. He didn't clean his clothes very well. He smelt badly. He was very drunk a lot of the time. He was very, very stooped. He had a proper dowager's hump. He was. It was
How old was he at this point?
59.
So still a relatively young man, really.
Still a young man.
You're too young to. What's the trace chart? Too young to have a body like that.
He looked about 90. And he told me that he'd started seeing her again. He was really, really worried. He delayed telling me for several months, and when he did tell me, I just went, "Darling, that's fantastic. I was really genuinely pleased and relieved, because he was lonely.
Yeah.
He was desperately lonely and sad, and I said, this is wonderful. I'm really happy." And he cried and said, "Thank you. That means so much to me to hear you say that."
But that comes back to this, when you said you really loved each other enough to set each other free. And here you could hear that same love coming through again, because yes, you still loved him, but you weren't able to be with him, but you didn't wish him harm. You didn't wish him loneliness, and no. I think that the fundamental thing I'm hearing throughout this story, for want of a better word, is love, actually.
Yes, too much love, unfortunately. There is such a thing. It's easier to fall out of love with somebody. Much easier. It's hard when you don't. Despite it all, we didn't. And so anyway, then I finished up in India. I was heartbroken at leaving India. It was hard leaving India. Really was.
Never been. Would you recommend?
Oh, it was fantastic. I loved it. And also when you work in a place like that, because of the community that you're in, you have instant friends.
Yeah. And
they become like family. And I had made a best friend there who's a Kiwi, and she's been amazing. She's been an absolute brick.
And I will just say that as a fellow ADHD, to go somewhere like India, which is so culturally different, the smells, the sights, the colours, the noise, to go into that, like, all kudos to you, because that is bloody brave. Well done.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't do things by half. So anyway, I was coming home for the summer before coming out to Australia. So the plan was that I was going to spend 6 weeks in England, living with my husband in our house. He had said, I said, look, I don't want to do this. Like, you're in this relationship. I don't want you to fuck up this relationship. Please. I don't want to be that ex-partner, that ex-wife, right? And he said, no, it's fine, it's fine. He said, we've talked about it. I want to spend this time with you. It's really important to me that I spend this time to you. You're my best friend and all of this. And so we're not going to have, we're just going to have that, like, okay. All right. So we'll do that. He'd arranged for our best friends, five of our closest friends, to come and have cocktails in the garden to welcome me home.
When you heard the words cocktails in the garden, do you think, oh my God, he's going to be drinking? Or at this point, is it not that it's not your problem, but it's like, you're going to do what you're going to do?
Yes. I had managed, that was a big part of me going away, was that I had to separate to accept that I couldn't change him. I couldn't fix him.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd managed to do. And I had got to that point. I can't fix you. I can't do it. You're going to be the person you're going to be. And I will love the parts of you that I love. And I can't change it. It is going to be what it is. Yeah. He picked me up from the airport on the 3rd of June, 7, at 6 o'clock. He looked a mess. He couldn't walk. He could walk about 10 paces, and then he had to stop for breath. He looked terrible. He was grey, like in the face. I mean, he was white haired anyway by then, but like he was grey and sunken and stooped and had no energy, and he was a mess, and he smelled, and still there.
When you started talking, you said that one of the big fears for you was that you or the boys would see him almost in that sort of homeless get up, smelling and
yes,
and actually the guy that picked you up from the airport kind of fixed that description.
There was a bit of that. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't quite as bad as I had imagined, but yeah. And also at this point, our eldest son was getting married on the 1st of July, and he had only recently decided to send his dad a wedding invitation. We were all worried sick about it. But, my sister and I, because they were holding it in her garden, we had sort of like worked out a plan that, and my husband had promised not to drink, which, I mean, what now those promises are. And then and do you know what? He meant it. They always do. Alcoholics mean it. They want to stop it. They don't want to do it. But it's a nasty, bloody illness. It really is a fucker. So there was that looming. So there was like some worries, but I planned this whole lovely 6 weeks exhibitions we're going to go to, getting out, doing the things that I knew that he loved, right? Not just sitting at home drinking. I planned to do a little trip. I'm going to go to France. I put this onto the train, the Euro thingy.
Eurostar.
That's it. Thank you. So he picked me up from the airport on the 3rd of June. We got back home. Our village is beautiful. And when we drove into the village, and I'd just driven from, flown in from Delhi, where the air was stifling and polluted. It's not as bad when it's that hot, but it was very hot and you couldn't be outside. Into this beautiful, leafy, beautiful little village road. And I said, oh, and at that point he coughed because he also had gastric reflux. And I've always found that a very triggering sound because it's a very sharp sound. And I have a lot of sensory issues. Yeah. Right. And so I'd always just stuck my fingers in my ears when he did that because I just had to block the sound out. And he'd always found that a bit upsetting when I did that. Anyway, whole other tangent. And then, and he coughed, and at that exact point, I went, "Oh, stop! I want to get out and walk." And he got really cross with me. And I went, "No, It's not because of that. It's because
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's a summer's evening. It's leafy. I love this rain. It's like 200 yards to our house. I've come from Delhi. I want to
Want to feel
breathe.
that country air.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if he just felt a bit ashamed or something because of that. I don't know. But anyway, he got home. He said, "Oh, Louise, come and have a gin and tonic with me in the garden." I went, "Yep, I will do soon, but I just need to unpack because this is my system. When I transition, I have to follow the system, and I needed to unpack." And I was in the spare room, because we weren't obviously sharing a bedroom. And it took me a bit longer to unpack. And by that time, I was exhausted. I'd been awake for about 18 hours by that point. And I went into the garden, and it was like 9 o'clock at night. And I said, "I'm not going to have a drink, actually. I'm really, really tired. I'm going to go to bed." And he said, "Okay." And he stood up and gave each other a really, really big, deep, loving hug. And he said, "I'll always love you. You're my best friend. And I'll always love you." And I said, "I love you too, and I always will." And I went to bed, and then he obviously, I got up in the middle of the night. He'd obviously then hit the bottle badly. Presumably he couldn't handle the emotions and everything that came up.
And
I get
also
it.
I'm thinking, one gin and tonic is never one gin and tonic, right?
No. Yeah, that's right. And then in the middle of the night, I got up to go to the loo, realised his bedroom light was on, went in. He was passed out, like horizontally across the bed, half clothed. I thought, he had sleep apnea, so he was snoring very heavily. I shut the bedroom, switched the light off, shut the bedroom doors, like covered him over, shut the bedroom door, and went back to sleep and thought nothing of it. I could hear him up and down, snoring away, or like, tossing and turning, getting up to go to the loo, that sort of thing. Because it's an old little cottage, so it had little,
hear everything. I've got an old house.
You can hear everything.
Kids are going to get away with nothing as teenagers. I can hear every screech.
Nothing, exactly, and they don't. Anyway, I got up early next morning, went up to the local leisure centre, went for a swim, tasted him swim where I was, came back, went out and got some stuff for our, our friends coming over in the afternoon. They were coming over at 3:30. My husband had promised to mow at least that little strip of lawn where we could all sit and be mown in months, and it was like a foot long grass. Texted him, said, "Hey, they're coming over soon. Don't forget." I could hear him snoring. I hear him moving around. But I thought, I'm not gonna. And it wasn't unusual for him when he'd been on a bender. Even if we had people coming round, he wouldn't get up. Even because he would just be like passed out and he couldn't face it. But he might get up at like 9 o'clock and come and, even if they've been there like since 3 o'clock, he might come and join us at 9 o'clock in the evening. And it wasn't unusual, this pattern. But I could hear him snoring away and moving about, and okay, all right, well, it's going to be one of those. But it's not. Previously, I'd be like up there going, "Come on, you've got to get up there," all down, trying to get him to gym along, which never worked. But I thought, no, I don't need to do that. It's not my problem anymore.
There's like a resignation here, but also a bit of an acceptance, isn't there? There's like I'm not actually a mum. Yeah,
that's right. It's not my problem anymore. I don't live with you. I'm here for 6 weeks, and I'll take the good when it comes along and accept the others. And
like you're a teenager, isn't it? You sort of let the rubbish wash over you and accept the glimmers of them.
Yeah. So our friends turned up. They were used to the fact that this kind of thing happened. They just went, "Oh, where is he?" And I went, not up. And they went, "All right, okay." They all knew what was happening.
He must have been quite a magnetic character. You said he was very character. So I'm thinking, for all these people to still want to be around him after all this, he must have had one hell of a personality and
very much so. Very lovable. Very lovable person, hugely charismatic, but not in that sort of like unpleasant, smarmy way. He was also very generous, loving and loyal friend,
Mhm.
and a very sensitive soul, a beautiful person to be around. But he was good. He was absolutely wonderful, you know. And then at 5 o'clock, I was in the kitchen with my best friend. They were just taking some glasses out and were sort of like sorting out some of the food. And suddenly it felt as though, you know, when there's been a power cut and you can just, the hum just suddenly stops,
Mhm.
right? It felt like that. And I turned to her and I said, what if he's dead? And I ran upstairs, and it literally came out of nowhere. It was as though there'd just been a power cut. Ran upstairs and he was dead.
I'm so sorry.
And thank you. And then as we came upstairs, the two men started doing CPR. I had emergency services on the phone. They were talking them through it. Paramedics turned up. They spent the next hour doing CPR, lots of CPR, even though he'd gone, and I was just saying, it's gone. I didn't want him to do it.
No.
I knew they had to do it, but I was saying it in the hallway to my friends. I said,
Leave him alone. He's
I
coming.
wish they'd just stop because he's not here. It's horrible. And then they went and they gave me like a few minutes of learn body.
How was that? I mean, that's a balance piece string question, but it's
No, I
often
understand.
this element of the trauma leaving them.
It was
This is the point I wish I could reach out and give you a little gentle, socially acceptable distance cut. Marshmallow hug. I'll give you a marshmallow hug. I wouldn't touch it.
Accepted. I just curled up on the floor next to him and played his earlobe, which is, you know, I'd always play with his earlobe, but stroked his face and had my head on his chest.
It's not the man that's just died that you're grieving right there, is it? It's the man that you fell in love with. It's either of your boys.
Yeah. Anyway, and then after prison like that, maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't know. And then the paramedics, you know, finished the paperwork with me. Our friends came back, you know, came in, and the 6 of us sat around with his body. We always the Guinness had it shared. We found a Guinness because we love Guinness, and the can of Guinness, and we shared that out in 5, 6 of us. We just sat around talking, holding his hand. You know, he was dead, obviously, holding his hands and talking and joking and reminiscing, and
That's really
while we waited
quite
for
special
the
that time. I've not heard anybody else that's had that
yeah.
and done it that way. That almost like think what I'm thinking.
Proper wake.
Like awake. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Where you're sitting within, you know, minutes, hours of him dying, and you're coming together. That's quite powerful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing way to go. He could hear his, you know, friends out in the garden, drinking cocktails, his best, you know, all the best friends. Knowing, having said, you know, we always loved each other. Had that beautiful.
Those last words are important, aren't they?
Yeah. And to go so suddenly.
Do they know what it was that actually caused his death? I mean, I know from your notes that it was alcohol related, but was it a heart attack that caused
yes,
death?
it was a heart attack with severe alcoholic liver disease. But it was a heart attack. Yeah, big heart attack.
And I know this is a bit, probably a bit digging into detail, but it was 5:15 that you had this thought. And when did you actually die?
Sorry, what did you say?
What time did they call the time of death? I'm just thinking, how close was it to the point 5:15 when you you had this thought, oh, he's dead? I was wondering if it was sort of weird.
6:21.
But that would be after they'd performed CPR, wouldn't it?
That's when they called his death. And then we sat with his body until the undertakers came at 11:30.
Oh gosh, that's a long time.
Yeah. It was, I'm so grateful that our friends were there to do that with me. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to be able to do. Really, really lovely. They were worried about leaving me in the house on my own, but I didn't. I needed to be on my own. And I don't know. I've often wondered, is that an autistic thing? Because I listen to a lot of the others on your podcast. They always say, oh, and then everybody came and I couldn't be alone. And it was like, no, I had to be alone. I needed to be on my own. I couldn't have. I
think for me, it was I'd be not wanting to be alone because then the thoughts would run. So it was distract at all costs. Gosh, this is so sad. But I'm now thinking that you've got to tell your boys, and I'm wondering if I don't know whether this is if there's sort of an inevitability about the thing happening, but you must have known deep down that he was probably going to die young, and probably of something related to alcoholism. But that doesn't take away the tragedy and the sadness. But I just think there's a kind of beautiful serendipity about the fact that you were there, with you being away so much. The fact
unbelievable,
that you were there.
Right? Unbelievable. It's almost like he hung on.
Yeah.
And you know what? There was a weird experience I had, and I've always been, my background is science, so I've always been very skeptical. But as you get older, you tend to be loosen those skepticism just a little bit. And his sister got quite unpleasant, and after the death, we had a brilliant funeral, by the way. We had.
I just saw these Sharpies on the coffin. That's amazing.
We did. We had a cardboard coffin, and we just said to everybody, "Look, it's informal. Turn up. There's going to be Sharpies and all of this out, and people are going to write on it and just have a good time and remember my husband, and draw all over the coffin and write things and then." And then at the end, we finished up with a sort of a Quaker style kind of like people sharing if they wanted to share, spoke if they wanted to speak. Our eldest son did a really beautiful speech. It was really, really good. Unfortunately, I made this cracking playlist for it as well, which went on, and it was a proper hour and a half playlist. And it was playing it in the sort of. There's a bit where we had some photographs been flashing up on the screen that was playing, and then we're supposed to be able to turn it down when our eldest son was doing the speech and we were all doing the talking, right, and the sharing, but we couldn't turn it down. It was broken. It broke, and we were saying, "Oh, that's my husband."
That's the final word.
Yeah, because it was all there was rave music and there's house music and all sorts of stuff. Punk. It was really good. And then all the stuff because I'd always said, right, we need to over the years it drove me nuts to say, oh, this is a good one to put on your funeral playlist.
I've got Ben's playlist still in my phone for his funeral. I was really annoyed because it wasn't loud enough. I had the opposite problem.
But his sister was furious with us and just refused to come to the funeral because
because it wasn't appropriate.
Yes. And also because we put the charity was, can't remember exactly what it's called now, but anyway, it's for children of alcoholic parents.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, you're just branding him as an alcoholic. And we went, well, he wasn't alcoholic.
Did you meet him? Yes.
Yeah. So she was pretty nasty. She then befriended this first girlfriend that he'd started seeing again, who turned out to be a little bit batshit crazy herself, and she wanted to put in her nightie in the coffin. No, that's not going to happen. Anyway, my niece spoke to her and said, you should not come to the funeral. It will not be appropriate. The boys don't want to see you. It's too raw. I mean, they'd only been seeing each other again, really, because they didn't properly see each other again since March, and I think she popped round a couple of times a week. So they hadn't seen each other
not a great love
much. Yeah, but my sister-in-law was promoting it as the great love. He'd returned to the love of his life. that
Nice.
I had abused him his whole life, that I had was the cause of his death. Yes. So I was dealing with these rather strange texts I was getting from this girlfriend as well. She was sending me some weird texts. And not malicious, not unkind, just like, it's just like, I don't need to deal with you.
Mm.
I can't. I'm sorry. And then all of this shit from his sister. His brother didn't come back to the funeral. He was in France on holiday.
He didn't come back to the funeral.
Nope.
It's a very odd message to send your boys. And
Yep.
I know we're talking about them like they're children, but they're adults, but they're young
Yeah.
adults, and it's their dad.
Yeah. And actually, where that sort of thing's concerned, I think in some ways you always are a child.
Yeah.
But, you know, his family was weirdos. They are a bit fucked up in the head, to be fair. So there was this. So yes. So this is it. So there was this one morning, and at that time I started listening to. I got obsessed with Budapest. You know, the song by
George Ezra.
George Ezra. That's right. And I literally had it on repeat from morning to night.
Again, very on brand.
Very on brand. and would just like, and I found it incredibly cathartic to be able to sing, because I can't sing, but to be able to get that at the top of my lungs and get all of that out. And then this one morning, I just had a complete meltdown. And I mean, it was probably the biggest meltdown I've ever had.
And when we say a meltdown as a neurodivergent person, we don't mean we had a bad day, went to bed. We mean, I can't describe your meltdowns, but mine can involve hitting walls. I've hit my head against a wall.
Yes,
I've laid on the floor. Yeah, I've, I called all the A&E staff. The same, come. I bet you behave in a very out of character way. And the way it was described to me by my psychiatrist was, you are an autistic meltdown or neurodivergent meltdown or spiral is comparable to running up to half a marathon in terms of the physical toll it takes on your body. So you then go into, you get like the aftershocks, don't you, where you are tired and debilitated and filled with shame. So the reason I'm just going into a bit more detail is because I just want people to know what the magnitude of this meltdown is, that it's not, you had a bit of a cry into a pillow, which...
No.
You wish, right?
I wish. It was proper rage crying. It was, and I was shouting at him and saying, why did you leave me to sort out these two fucking mental women? What the fuck have you done? So I was having this full-on autistic meltdown. And by the way, I only got diagnosed in February 23. So I was still sort of like coming to terms with settling into my diagnosis as well.
And it gets worse, doesn't it? It's a really peculiar phenomenon of, once you're diagnosed, your traits will come out. And I noticed that even with my 6-year-old, she had her diagnosis about 2 months ago, and she came home and she was like spinning in the garden. She's never spun before. Very autistic trait, spinning, and she just went, it feels so nice to spin. And I was like, because you're free now, you're free, like, you know who you are now, like, just lean in. And I guess when you first find out yourself, a lot of the traits that you have worked very hard to mask, and a lot of people will use alcohol and things to help keep those meltdowns at bay, and you release them, and it's quite powerful, because you're learning, your body's doing its thing, but it's also really scary. I genuinely thought I was losing my mind at times, and you must have done too. Yeah. It is. It's a very, very strange experience. So where I should have been sort of like really sort of digging into and settling into it, I was actually then plunged straight into this whole weird situation. And so I had this massive meltdown, and I sort of started to, and I was banging my head against the wall just because that feedback. I was able to stop myself doing it hard enough to cause any damage, but it felt good even just to get some of it. And I haven't done that before. I've never done that before. And then I sort of like got myself to the point where I was calmer, and I went downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and I noticed there was a small puddle of water on the kitchen counter, and I thought,
that's weird. There's nowhere near a tap. There's nowhere near a kettle. And I looked up at the ceiling and there was no drips up there. I climbed up onto the kitchen couch and felt the ceiling and there was nothing there. I thought, that's weird. So I mopped it up, went out of the room, came back in 2 minutes later, and there was another puddle of water in a perfect heart shape.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And this is you saying this with, and you described yourself as having a scientific background, because I am very much on the skeptic side of the fence. But it's impossible doing this job to speak to the amount of people you speak to without going, oh, really? Because often these people are not, there's nothing wrong with it, but into post-modern spirituality. And you sort of, you might, because you can see whatever you're looking for, we know this. But when people come to it from a much more sort of practical, slightly skeptical background, and they see whatever signs, that's quite something. Did you feel comforted by that?
Yeah, I did. It was beautiful. It was really beautiful, because I've been screaming at him, what the fuck have you done, leaving me with these, to sort out this ship, to sort out these two mad women on my own. Why have you done this? Where have you gone? Where are you? And I just kept shouting, I don't know where you are. Because that's how it felt. Felt like that for a very long time.
And I guess I don't know where Ben is, but the same thing. I was it was a day or two before his memorial service, and I'd gone to doctors, but I wanted to ask for something like a diazepam because I was very, very anxious. And the doctor had sort of shrugged his shoulders at me, very dismissive. It wasn't my usual doctor. And I'd gone outside. I had the baby in the pram, and I just lost it, like on the floor, howling at the, in full public view, didn't care, just howling. And again, it was one of these things, it's probably a coincidence, but a little white feather just floated into her and landed on her face. And you just feel like, okay, it might be my imagination, but I'm taking that as a sign that I can put my shit together because this baby needs me. And, I had a feather tattooed on myself. It felt such a poignant moment, in that second. And I did see a spiritualist very early on, and they were crap. And it sort of put me off. But my mother-in-law has been to see one, and she's genuinely convinced that she has spoken to Ben. And it's very difficult when something like that happens to not want to immediately launch yourself in and like book an appointment and go and see. So I have to, because I'm conscious of managing my very tightly controlled emotions and grief. And it's I don't know. It's. Would you do that? Would you go see a spiritualist?
No, but so this is a funny sort of like tangent to the side story to this.
Love it.
Is in September 23, September 22. So I was in India, and my best mate, my Kiwi mate, and I went to Rishikesh for a long weekend. Can't remember. Because I'm massive. My big thing is Beatles.
Is what?
And Beatles. So
like the band or the creature?
The band.
Just checking.
Yeah. No, I know, because lots of us are into the actual insects, but no, I'm into the band and happy to was 11. And I've just, by the way, just like a few moments ago, stopped myself info dumping on a side, but that's all right. We won't go there now. So I was in Rishikesh. And when we were there, and she's very into sort of like the spiritual stuff, and I think she calls it being canny, and like that's run in her family for several generations. They're ex-Liverpudlians, and
that explains the canny then.
Yeah, and she's always saying like that. She'd been to tarot readers a couple of times and found them very helpful. So I went, oh look, while we're in Rishikesh, why not have a look? So we're looking, like, just as a laugh, we're looking on the tarot reader sort of directory in Rishikesh. And I went, oh, there's a Dr. Elvis.
Oh, well.
We're in Rishikesh. There's a Dr. Elvis who's a tarot. We have to see Dr. Elvis. So we saw Dr. Elvis, and he, I said to him, look, I'm really skeptical. And he said, look, I see this just as a different form of a counselling session. It's just that we use these cards to kind of open things up a bit as a basis for talking. And all right, okay, I can get
when you put it like that,
yeah. And he said, so, you know, I told him a little bit about, like, I was moving to Australia, and he looked at me and said, one of the cars, and he went, it's going to be a very difficult year. Very, very difficult year.
No
And I
shit.
went, in what way? Yeah, no, exactly. I went, in what way? And he went, I went, because of the job. Is the job going to be like too difficult for me? And he said, oh, no. He said, the job is going to be really good. That's going to be fine. Emotionally, it's going to be a very difficult year. And I just thought, well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
What's new, right?
I'm right. I'm moving to the other side of the world. Of course, it's going to be a difficult year. And then my husband died, and I thought, oh,
That'll be the
it
emotional
was,
struggle.
yeah, that'll be the emotionally difficult year. That because he was really emphasizing, emotionally really the hardest thing. Oh. So then I got it in my head that 5th of June this year, I would be over, maybe 22nd of June, because it was the day after the funeral, I'd be fine. Anyway, I go on, don't I?
No, not at all. You're fascinating. I could listen to you for hours, so please don't. In fact, I have.
So that happened. The funeral was very good. His sister was horrendous.
Did you turn up in the end?
No, I've never heard from her again.
Oh, wow.
Or her brother.
And what about your sons? Have they heard from them?
No. She arranged a memorial in the village, on the village green, without telling me that she was going to do it.
Stop it. In the village that you live in?
Yeah. Fortunately, unbeknownst to her, I had already booked my plane ticket to leave. Right. So she arranged it for the 2nd of September, and I left on I think it was the 31st of August. But she didn't know that. So I could have walked up onto the village green and seen all this going on and I'd have had no idea. I did know, because my other sister-in-law, the brother's ex-wife, told me. But yeah, that's the kind of person
death does strange things to people, and it really does, doesn't it?
Yeah. So then, of course, because we rented this house, our beautiful home, which actually was, the house, the boys and I had moved into that when my husband and I were separated, when he wasn't with us. We had made that our home, and then he moved in with us. It had seen us through everything. It was a beautiful, beautiful cottage, and it was very much a family member. That sounds weird, I know, but it was a family member. So then, of course, it held. We were married for 32 years. He died exactly a month before our wedding anniversary. So nearly 32 years. 31 years and 11 months. And then, but then, of course, I had to then suddenly get rid of everything. Pack it all up, which was not expected. That was not in the plan. So there was another grief there, grief on grief of leaving India, grief of leaving my friends in India, grief of my husband, my best friend, dying, then grief of having to pack up our beautiful home and all of the stuff and get rid of everything. And it was a mess. It was, it was, it was.
And it's not like you're moving into another house where you can, put things in cupboards and storage. You're moving to the other side of the world.
Yeah. Has moving to the other side of the world. And so then I did that. So I moved to the other side of the world. It's been a really fucking hard year. And so I had to come here. I had to find somewhere new to live. I had to buy a car. I had to do all of that. No friends, no community. I gave myself the grace of a year to not go out and make friends. I said, I'm not going to even try.
Just sit with it for a bit.
Too much. I just need to land. But I'm still having regular weekly video calls, virtual drinks with my bestie from who's in India, the Kiwi woman, and text back and forth with my best friend back in England, woman who I'd been supporting all through her midlife crisis the whole time I was in India, and with her husband, who's best friend, and he and I were also very good friends. And then after a few weeks of being here, literally maybe 6 weeks, I realized that I was not getting, she was being a bit, not really responding to my text very much. And So I started sort of like sent her a couple of texts that were about gardening because she loves gardening, thinking, oh, I'll go in on her interest because, you know, if you're autistic.
Yeah.
That's where you go.
I'll find your special interest and I'll learn all about it.
Exactly. And so I was asking her questions, and I kept writing and saying, hey, can we have a Zoom call? I'd, you know, really, you know, be lovely to call. I asked that 4 times. And then eventually I said, oh, I'm just a bit worried about you. Are you okay? Is everything okay? You're thinking, oh shit, maybe something's happened to my other kids, her kids. And she texted back and dumped me.
And
She
you know
said
what?
that she was hurt at everything that had happened or didn't happen over the summer. Our relationship had suffered. And I was thinking, well, I remember the only thing that happened was my husband died. And she said she was hurt and angry, and I hadn't noticed and I hadn't cared.
Wow.
So I then went and put it all. So I took it back and said, this is a shock. I don't understand. And then left it at that. But I went back there. I thought, you know, okay, well, and again, this is, I don't know if this, I think that non-autistic people do this as well. You know, you start to obsess and think about, what did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong.
Ruminating,
I'll go back. So I got, and I think this is probably where non-autistic people don't do it. I made a spreadsheet and I put in all
you have me a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And I put in all the data from our WhatsApp conversations, like surprised it. So I did into like the topics, who had initiated it, how long it had taken to respond, who had ignored, you know, and to see if there were any gaps, so I could analyze the data. And sure enough, it was very clear. But it wasn't me who had not done any of the noticing or caring. I'd done all of it.
It's funny. I mean, it's very mild comparison, but on one of my group chats, someone said, "Oh, the weather's meant to be even hotter today." So I checked the weather, saw that it wasn't going to be hotter tomorrow. I screenshot and sent it to my other friend and went, "It's the neurodivergent urge to be right, but I don't want to rock the boat."
Yes, well, it's just like, am I wrong? I need all the. I
You need
more
to know,
information. I need all
don't
the
you?
data. I needed to check. I needed to find out because I do make mistakes. You know, I don't know.
Of course.
People do tell me I'm blunt or I get things wrong, and you know, they'll say it in the moment, and I'll go, I don't know, explain it to me. And since my husband died, I've realised just how much explaining he did for me.
Scaffolding, right?
So they dumped me and I haven't heard from them since. And then he started ghosting me after that. And I haven't heard him since. Not my husband, obviously he is ghosting me.
He's ghosting
but his best friend, who I was also very close to. And
that's really sad because female friendships and just platonic friendships in general, they are like the unspoken grief because, and I had a guest on whose best friend had died and she was in quite an abusive marriage. And when he died, she said, but I was grieving my friend so much more than I was grieving my husband and nobody could understand that. And actually, I lost, I have lost literally my best friend many years ago, and I'm still grieving him. my eldest son has his name as a middle name. But my sort of female best friend at the time that Ben died, we don't speak anymore. It's like people just cannot cope with how you behave, how you feel, the enormity of what's going on in your world. And I don't know your friend, but your former friend, but it sounds like you were very, very supportive to her. And then when you needed the support, she felt she didn't like the being on the other foot almost. And I just think people, whether it be malicious or not, they don't know how to deal with this new version of you that comes out. Because, not that I'm saying there's an excuse, but I just think it's more common than you would think for the friendships to change after you lose somebody. My social circle is very, very different now, but it also really hurts. And it's like being dumped. You've got, especially without a real explanation. And it leaves you questioning yourself.
Yeah, and I before this, because I know that she doesn't particularly like doing video calls, and before I went to India, she said, "Oh, be lovely to write actual letters to each other."
Oh yeah,
and I ended up not having time to do that in India. I was having too much fun, but I thought, oh, okay. I remember she said that she would like that, so I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll write her a long letter. So I wrote it to both of them. I wrote a really long letter, like 3 pages, like describing the landscape and what the job was like, and all that. And then I wrote 1 page in there, 4 page, that's explained I was at my absolute nadir. I told them how bad it was. I was waking up in, I was dreaming of his corpse. I'd wake up, you wake in the night and you wake up because you're sobbing in your sleep, uh, and just that the way that it just comes out and just hits you. So I wrote and told them all that and said, I need to talk to you because I want to, you're the people who know the Bob, particularly the husband, that he knew the better than any other person I can really talk to on that level about it. So it was a double whammy because I lost that ability to have somebody else to grieve with.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anybody to grieve with here. Nobody questioned me about it. Nobody asked about it. No, it was tough. And then also to grieve a friendship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
it's been really good.
that's another kind. I mean, it's different. It's like some people who lost people within years of getting together, and that's an enormous tragedy. It's all that time. But when you speak to people who, you were early 20s when you got together, so really kind of grown up together, gone through, jumped some hurdles, and throughout all of it, you've reiterated throughout the 2 hours we've been speaking, and he was my best friend, and I loved him, and that is the kind of thread that running through the entirety of your 32 years of marriage is that he was your best friend, and whether you could be together romantically or not, you've still lost that enormous presence in your life. I mean, that is huge, and you're only just a year into your grief, really, aren't you?
Yeah. And at that point, I went online and went and joined, which is how I heard about the podcast, like back in, not long after he died. I think I was in some Facebook group and you said, oh, by the way, I've got this podcast and thank you for this because I listened. There was such a support. Yeah, it was such a support. I listened to them like right from the start all through. To just hear other people's stories was incredibly
Full spoken word, isn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was good to do it. And then there came a point where I didn't need to do it anymore. And that was about a good 6 months. And I was in another group and I said something about how suddenly the grief is almost worse around about the 4-month mark. And somebody said, yeah, that's when the shock's worn off. And then it hits you, and my God. And that's when I wrecked them, and that's when they dumped me.
And it's also when a lot of the support dissipates because the funeral's been done, people have dropped off meals, their work is almost done. And
that didn't happen. I didn't get any of that.
Did not get any.
No, but I mean, these friends have been incredibly supportive the whole time I was in England, like packing up, and they've really helped. They helped clear up the house. They put loads of effort in. They're running errands. They doing loads and loads of support. So it literally came out of the blue. I don't know.
And you're then thinking, I don't know what I've done. And we do blame ourselves as well, because you're thinking, well, what on earth did I do that was so horrible?
Yeah, something so heinous. I can't have done anything that was so heinous that you do that to somebody when they're in the depths of grief. You just don't do that. It's just
you don't. And it's not like you were going to be a particularly needy friend. You live the other side of the world. We're talking a video call every now and then.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just thinking I would like to sort of hear what life is like for you now, because you're still, like I said, you're still fairly fresh, but do you feel like you've settled in Australia? And how do you think, are you there for the foreseeable, or do you think you'll come home? I think you should go back to India.
Well, I wouldn't mind. It's been, it's hard. This is beautiful, I have to say. I have landed in one of the most beautiful places on earth. It's a peninsula. The beaches are stunning. The sea is incredible. We get whales doing a swim past, see dolphins playing. I live a 10-minute walk from the beach. I mean, it's beautiful. It's incredibly beautiful. The people are kind. I have no friends. That's not true. I think I might have just made a friend.
I want an update on this before this episode goes out. We'll be like, Louise has a friend.
Yeah. I have started on Bumble. I've talked to a few guys. I've been for a coffee with a couple of them. Neither of them are going to go anywhere.
No. You got to dip your toe back in that pond at some point.
Just dipping it, yeah. The job is good. It's very, very good. It's just hard being without friends and without community. When you go through grief.
Grief is one of the most isolating things that a human can experience, because your world is transformed and everything else seems to be going on around them. And then to be in a different country, it must be tough. Ben and I, we had plans to move down to Devon, and we were planning to move in 2018, which was the year he died. And I just kept thinking, thank God I didn't go, because I wouldn't have had time to build a network. It would have been so isolating. I think actually having some children helped me, because you are forced to go out and, do the school run and the pubs and all that sort of stuff. So I think when your children are older, if you don't have children, it's really tough to put yourself back out there again.
And also when you get older, it's hard to develop new friendship groups, because everybody's sorted and settled into their friendship. Unless you go to an expat community, which obviously you had in India, people are already settled into their friendship groups.
Yeah.
So you're not able to sort of like find, it's very, very hard. I'll get
You're still doing yoga?
A little bit. I've just started swimming again. Swimming is my thing. It's very good for me.
I like swimming.
Walking is very good for me. I know I'm pretty good at making myself do all the things I need to do to keep my mind from wandering.
It's like a job, isn't it? It's like an actual job. As I rub in the testosterone cream, take my vitamins, do my meditation, do this. And I'm thinking,
daily meditation.
Like a full-time job before I've even had a coffee. Since 2000, I'm quite new to it. I've been doing like the breath control work as well, where you hold the breath for a prolonged period of time, and I find that very calming. But I started off, I could only do 3-minute meditations, and now I'll do sort of 20-minute, half an hour, and you're training the muscle, aren't you? It's like you're not going to do it instantly.
My mind wanders all over the place.
Yeah,
but that's fine. That's also part of it.
Yeah. Well, Louise, I think I'm going to wrap us up now, because do you know how long we've been on? 2 hours and 11 minutes. That is impressive.
Yeah.
Good job. I
wonder if there's one last thing that I could do.
Yes, of course there is.
Is that all right?
No,
I wrote
of course.
sort of a thing. It poured out of me in the middle of the night a few months ago.
No, I'd love you to. Please do.
Is that all right? It's a bit sweary.
Even better.
All right. It's called complex grief, or the ultimate head fuck.
Nice.
Yeah. Grief is a shocker, but I don't need to tell you that. How it body slams you from the side, how it comes at you in the middle of the night, wrenching the air from your lungs in a single gut-deep sob, how its salt-slick caresses your cheeks like the lover you once were. My widow story began on the 4th of June 2023, but really it began decades before then, generations before then. Probably it has always been, as every story has. There is no arc here, no story arc, because there is no culmination, no beginning, no middle, because how the fuck can there ever be a middle? Not when there is no arc, because stories have no end. Perhaps this isn't a story. Perhaps there are no stories. Perhaps there are only maps, because like maps, every moment leads to any number of other moments. They tell you to circuit. But what do you do when there's a circuit of grief? When you grieve a husband, a lover, your rock, your life, the life that would have been, could have been, but really never should have been. When you grieve a friendship, and all the friendships that went with it. The home, the certainty, the familiarity, all those bastard things that you turned away from that felt good to run from when he was alive and keeping him tethered. Cast adrift. That's how I feel. Not at sea, but out in space, floating formless with no idea which way is up and which way is down, because it no longer exists. A defunct concept of once upon a time we met, until we didn't. And then I left you, and then you left me, and then you left me permanently. Everybody leaves in the end. We all go home eventually, back to where we didn't come from, to where we've never been before and never will again. All this coming and going. It's exhausting. No wonder I'm so tired. When did we get so angry? When did it start? All that fire and rage, and whose belly did it start in? Whose eyes did it blaze in first? Did we light that fire? I remember the spark, the one that flared at first meeting, the meeting of the souls, the ones that said, here, I knows you. I remember the radiance of the inch of air separating your arm from mine, the hairs on your arm reaching out, falling to me. Touch me. I remember the bright vulnerability as your eyes fell into mine, as your heart beat in your throat, drumming its song to me. Stay with me, trust with me. And yet the love never lost, never left, never gave us peace. All that fire melted our cores together, inseparable, indeterminable, one from the other, the tallest stroke of all, this ancient love that spans centuries in a world where time has no time, because not loving is the easier path. And now my heart rises again, filling my throat, making its clumsy, swollen escape to the back of my mouth, reaching up through my eyes, unfurling my lips, filling its protest, its denial, its despair at your demise. Why the fuck aren't you here? Where the fuck have you gone? How could you have left me to figure this shit out on my own? So what if we didn't share a continent? So what if we didn't share a bed? So what if we didn't share a glass of wine? Our fingertips still touched. They never let go. We remained connected. And now you've totally, utterly, infinitely fucked off.
Good. That's really good. You're a very powerful writer. That's really good. I wrote down a couple of notes of the meeting themselves, and also this feeling of being out in space, good to see. I have rocket man data and feeling, because that's how it felt, even though he's at sea. Louise, I think that's a good place to leave it, because well, I'm on the cusp of crying now. Thanks. Thank you. That was one of the most powerful and enlightening conversations I've recorded, and I feel quite humbled that you chose to come and tell me your story, actually, because what you've talked about, so many people will recognize, will relate to, and a lot of that shame and the stigma around alcohol. And even like his sister saying that he didn't want the charity to be for children of alcoholic parents. Like, push it under the carpet. That's worked so well for so many generations. Let's just carry on doing that. And I wish you every happiness and opportunity in Australia. I really do. And if you find your way back to India, let me know. I'll come back to you. And I'd love to go. I really would love to.
That would be great.
But yeah, for now, I just thank you for being brave enough to come on and share this, because it's not easy. And I hope that you've got it's evening where you are. You can hopefully you got a hot chocolate and come up and have an early night tonight, because you're probably going to be quite
It's a late night. It's long past my bedtime.
Is it actually? It's past 9 o'clock now. Yeah, that's it's a late
It's
night.
9:30 nearly. Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry
thank
for
you.
rambling on so much.
No, please don't apologize. You didn't ramble at all. Honestly, it was. I get quite distracted. After about an hour, I struggle with things can't pop in my mind. I have to work quite hard to concentrate. We've just done nearly 2.5 hours, and I could carry on if it wasn't like a sweatbox in the studio. I could carry on.
I'm sorry.
No, it's been a real. It seems for me to say it's been a pleasure to meet you because of the subject that we covered. But it's been a pleasure to meet you. You are a powerhouse of a woman, and I feel quite humbled to be in your company, if I'm honest. So thank you.
I appreciate you doing this podcast. Honestly, it was a huge help to me.
It's that idea that, and you relate to this, if there isn't what you needed, you make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
And if you would be kind enough to send me a copy of that poem, I would really like to share it.
Of course.
Thank you. And to anybody who is listening out there, it has been an emotive episode, and there might be areas that you want to kind of have a chat with me, or I can also put questions to Louise about. For everybody else sort of battling through out there, I wish you lots of love and luck as we navigate this together. And biggest thanks all to Louise today for joining me, and I will be back with you guys in the next episode. Take care out there. Thank you.